Previously on the Game On podcast.
So, yeah, it was a bit of a look. It's the suburban Victorian grounds of the old VFL / early AFL days. They were scary, but the parochial supporters. But gee whiz, as a South Australian going over there to play for the Adelaide Crows was massive and it was exciting, and you wouldn't be dead for quids. It was just fantastic.
What an opponent first up though, Cass, too. Jeez.
Yeah, Dakes first. Actually, I was pretty lucky because he took a one-hander in I think the first 30 seconds, and I was like, oh my God, this could be a nightmare. And he's shanked the kick because we're in 6 feet of mud, so I was a bit lucky there. And then actually Paul Williams was running rampant, so I got flipped onto him pretty quick. So thank God I didn't stand Dakes for too long. But when you roll out in the middle of Vic Park on the half forward line there for the Collingwood Pies, and there's number 35, you go, oh God, it's like a dream and a nightmare all rolled into one.
That's a very good way of putting it, though.
Sportscast SA presents Game On. Game On. South Australians' destination for everything sports. Local, national, and international sports. AFL football, soccer, basketball, golf, baseball, tennis, cricket, and any other sports played in this wide world. And we're going to have a blast doing it. So sit back, relax, and let's do this thing. Welcome to Game On.
That was Sean Tusker from last week in The Great Man over at Victoria Park.
Yeah, great insight to Task's career, and then obviously on the concussion issue, which we're going to continue on as well.
We're going to follow up with David Stevens from the head of Neuroflex Research later on in the episode, so keep a bit of an eye out for that one.
Yeah, so greatly appreciated Sean's input in that regard as well.
Absolutely.
Around the grounds.
Kick off around the grounds today. We're going to have a little bit of a look at the World Cup, which is finally finished. The Big Bash, the Strikers, and some SANFL, local SANFL news. But first, mate, we kick off with the A-League. Very, very topical subject at the moment. We've had such a successful campaign overseas, and all of a sudden we've come back to a bit of volatility in the A-League.
Absolutely extraordinary. If any sport can score an own goal, it's the world game. Football, soccer,
yes.
Either way, whatever you want to say. But we've gained some momentum. You know, we've got, from an Adelaide side of things, Craig Goodwin scores against France and then, still effectively scores against Argentina. Okay, we can debate if there's an own goal or not.
Absolutely.
But we've hit a bit of momentum in the game. And then, bugger me, just a lunatic decision to go against something which, for my mind, the world game had correct here. I think it's a farcical that the grand finals in Melbourne every year, rugby and all that. I personally think home ground advantage, it's earned and it should occur. So that was the thing. And I'm sorry, the other thing is, as we know, in AFL, grand final at the G, you're going to get your 100,000. We know that beforehand. You're not going to with the world game. If you have Perth playing Adelaide in Sydney, you'll be lucky to get 10,000 for the game. And I think actually with this decision, there's so much angst from the supporters of the stupidity of it. I actually don't think you're going to get huge numbers to travel. Mary's obviously far better
Absolutely.
than us to speak about it.
And we'll bring Mary in now.
Yes.
We've spoken to her previously on a previous episode. I've touched base with her about the decision, and obviously the supporters groups have got together and put out a little bit of a statement, and I might let Mary expand on that a little bit further. Thank you, Mary, for joining us.
Afternoon, fellas. How are we?
Good, thanks.
Hi, Mary.
Obviously, it was a big shock to you guys as supporters, but what's been going on behind the scenes?
Behind the scenes, we've never seen more solidarity between active support groups as well as the general supporter bases across the clubs, of course, but particularly between, the hardcores that rock up week in, week out. For the last almost 2 decades, there's been your typical healthy, for the most part, rivalries. But this decision has brought every club, obviously by the obvious, together in a way that's never been seen before. And that just goes to show how diabolical this decision was and how completely wrong they got it.
Obviously, when it first happened, each supporter group was probably doing their own thing with slight variations, but I've noticed that you guys have put out a statement, a joint statement. Just run us through how that all came about and obviously what happens from now on.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously the decision hit the headlines last Monday, so a bit over a week. By Thursday, a couple of people that, from city to city that did know of each other started a conversation. So from memory, it was an Adelaide boy and a Melbourne City boy. Got chatting and agreed pretty quickly that, a bigger discussion should be held to just suss out how everyone was feeling in their respective cities. So we got a WhatsApp together. Everyone was in it by the next day, including Melbourne Victory. It was very obvious that, we were all furious. We were all heartbroken that they'd gone and done this without any consultation of the fans. And by each passing day, more news was hitting the headlines that some clubs weren't even told about it until it was signed, sealed and delivered. There's just so much wrong with the structure of the APL in itself that keeps clubs completely in the dark if they're not on that board. And that's just absolutely farcical when the decisions affect everyone. Big WhatsApp chat with 12 groups. We obviously tried to get some of the women's supporter groups involved as well. They have told us that, whilst they support our general message, they are in a bit of a different position, just with the women's game obviously being in more of an even dire of financial and supporter-based position than the men's. That they won't necessarily get on board with putting their logo on the statement that we came up with, but they fully support what we're saying and back everything that we want to fight for. Obviously, then by the Sunday or Saturday night rather, the Melbourne Derby and what happened there threw everything in the bin.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Agreed. So yeah, it's but that's where it started. And obviously, every single day, this chat has just been 24/7. This has become our lives. It's that important to us. It's that important that we represent our clubs and our fans, and we feel we're a decent voice to try and get the message across.
I actually think it's really poorly even explained by the hierarchy, which it's really just come out, well, it's $12 million, we need the money. But it hasn't really been pointed out the dynamic of it. Right, that's the figure. That's what we would have made out of the grant. That figure, 50-odd thousand people turning up at Adelaide Oval. What's the dynamics there of the money, of how that goes back to clubs and to the association? How about a bit how about a bit more transparency? Explaining everything,
Absolutely.
how you've come to that decision. And if they came and said, right, from that we only make $200,000, these are our expenses. By doing this, it's bankrolling the game for the next 10 years. Well, then you can sort of understand it. But at the moment, it's cloak and dagger stuff, hidden. And I think that's a big part of where the angst of all of us is about.
100%, mate. That's exactly what happened. And look, since then, over the last week, some of these figures have come out, and people do start to understand the position that they were in. But exactly what you said, it's too little, too late. We're already angry. We're already angry that you made a decision without the consultation of the biggest stakeholder, which is the fans. They talk about, all right, $12 million. We're going to distribute it amongst the clubs over a 3-year period. You'll all get X amount of money. And then, Destination New South Wales will earn that money back over the next 3 finals with this big U-Butte football festival over a week with lots of different activities, all-star games, the Dolan Warren game, awards night, all that. They're forgetting that the people that are going to give them that money back is us. We're the ones that have to pay for the flights, the accommodation, and then get there and give them our money for ticketing and food and drinks and merchandise and all those things. And it was just so short-sighted. They've literally picked the most expensive city in the country on top of the obvious full week. Can you imagine what you'd spend in a week in Sydney with all of those things? It's impossible. It's absolutely impossible for the everyday fan. In terms of the grand final itself, The hardcore supporters, we'll try all we can to always get to wherever our team is playing in a final. But it's the Joe Blows off the street that wants to take his kid to their first grand final in their home city. They're not going to be able to come up with $1,500 to be able to do that. And I think that's where they've just, one of the reasons where they've got it so wrong.
I think the Adelaide and Perth are a great example of how many numbers you can get to a game. Mary, I also noticed on your supporter statement, you came up with a list of 4 or 5 decisions that you'd like to see implemented.
Recommendations.
Yeah, recommendations. Yes.
Yeah. So look, we're not about calling them demands or throwing ourselves on the ground with our toys. This is a peaceful, unified statement with a list of reasonable suggestions of how we can work together better in the future. And one of the fourth one is an exploration into the New South Wales decision. Mm-hmm. But if that didn't happen, we still think the other things are achievable and reasonable. The active supporter fans, thanks to some, have been tarnished with a bad reputation. But we're not all like that. 90% of us are just football-loving people that are passionate. We're spending our hard-earned money on going into these games. We book our memberships before first kicks even hit the pitch. We count too. We're important too. It's not just the families and the individuals that buy a game ticket on the week. It's so we think that what we've come up with is reasonable. We've used information at hand from our own clubs, and we've all had most of us now at this point have had meetings with our own clubs privately. Mm-hmm. So we've got a little bit more background information on where our club stands in all of this, the financial situation, and what would be good and bad going forward. Should we sort of hit the pedal on further protests? So, and again, we've come back to that collective group chat and shared this information. So this wasn't just an overnight thing that someone just whipped up. This has been well thought out, well researched to the best of our ability. And at this point, what we are asking for is a collective meeting with the APL, but it will only be if every single supporter group is present. We don't want any individual supporter groups to be approached individually because we feel it's a divide and conquer tactic by them.
Yeah.
We're not going to do it.
I think
one request.
Key stakeholders are obviously the fans in any sport, and as soon as you start ignoring them, you're going to have some problems. Which sort of leads me on to my next point, and Malcolm, you can jump in here as well. The volatility that happened on Saturday night over in Melbourne, not a great advertisement for the game.
No, it's terrible advertisement for the game. Still, I think we're still stuck. Where in the hell did these flares get in so easily at
50 apparently?
Yeah, it's and the sand. Everyone's not sure whether that was taken in or whether it was lying around. Several bizarre things about it.
I mean, Mary, as part of the supporters group, you'd have been horrified to see supporters acting that way. But I think part of it is that little bit of volatility and that volcano ready to explode. That a lot of members and season ticket holders are quite angry, I suppose, at the decisions that have been made. But they sort of unfortunately displayed it in a manner that we didn't want to see at all.
No, we didn't. That was never in the plan, and it shocked the hell out of us as well because, as I said, OSM had a rep in that original chat. Yeah. It was not envisioned early on from the outset. When it happened, and the more we watched, people's Twitter footage and from the stands in the bays from different areas, yep. And then scrolling through further Twitter feeds and seeing previous comments that some hadn't seen before, it unfortunately seems like there had been rumours of it being a premeditated thing, and that really disappointed us because we had a plan, as I said, as a collective.
Yep.
It was a very difficult. It wasn't a difficult decision to make to exclude them from the statement. It was an obvious choice to make. Mm-hmm. We couldn't possibly be, seen to be any part of that or to accept it, and
especially not with a show cause notice that was in the pipeline. Obviously, straight after the event had happened.
No, it was heartbreaking to see. We were gutted. Like we were shocked. We couldn't speak, didn't sleep. It was just horrible. The way the rest of us felt after that happened, it was just such a poor demonstration of humanity, let alone anything to do with football.
That's superbly,
you know?
that's superbly put, Mary, and that's the more important thing. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. And it has no place in football. It doesn't have any place anywhere. And they took an opportunity to be horrible people, to just be purely horrible humans. And you know, we're never going to encourage that, and we won't be a part of it.
Unfortunately,
it doesn't represent the rest of us. You know.
Unfortunately, it's a case of the few spoiling it for the many, and it looks like on this occasion there was a few people that have been identified that were certainly spoiling for the fight, and we definitely don't want to be seeing that at any level of sport, let alone on the national stage as well.
No, 100%, and then they'll get their dues, and we're glad that things seem to be moving pretty swiftly there. They're not going too slowly on that, but you know we've moved on to an extent from that, and we need to make sure that the main message that was there before all this happened remains. So we all clubs by them will be continuing with our plans and of peaceful protests, and we'll remain committed to trying to get this meeting with the APL should they be willing to come to the party.
So I'll get you out of here on this one, and we talked about it briefly last week, and I'm not sure whether plans have changed, but you've got a game coming up on the 27th of December. Is the planned walkout of the Bays still going ahead?
We've altered it. We're going to do a walk-in. So we're after discussions with our own club, again, talking about what's important to our local area as well as the bigger picture. And also, like I said, not wanting to be seen as being pushy or disgusting or anything like that. We want to work in collaboration, but also get our point across. What we've decided just for this coming game on the 27th is a walk-in. So the first 20 minutes will actually be completely empty bays with our banner, which is the hashtag we've put on our statement, our voice, our game. And that's just to let them know how quiet things can be without the loudest voices in the game, which is the fans. At the 20th minute, we'll walk in and we'll be there to get back around our boys so that they're not impacted too much. Fantastic. Not to say that's going to be the plan with every game going forward, but this is just one way we've chosen to do it in this instance. It's a double header, so funny few things to work around there. Having the women's game beforehand, we felt this was effective in this instance.
Yep, no, good idea.
Sounds like you've got it all planned out there, Mary. Thank you for joining us tonight and giving us a bit of an update on, really a big week in soccer or the World Game.
It's ever changing, but we're committed, and we love it, and it means so much to us. So we're gonna dig in on this one, boys. But thanks for having me on.
Not a problem, and hopefully we can get you back on in the new year with some happier news.
Definitely,
absolutely.
Mary.
Thank you, Mary.
Absolutely.
Greatly appreciated, Mary.
Absolutely unbelievable scenes over in Melbourne over the weekend where pitch invasion was taken to a whole new level.
Shaking my head in disbelief that the World Game soccer has shot itself in the foot yet again in Australia. Yeah, just extraordinary. And look, we wait and see what penalties Melbourne Victory are going to get.
They've been obviously shown a show cause notice, which I believe was due today at 9 a.m. That's obviously been submitted, so we'll wait to see what happens from that. You'd be pretty much guaranteed there's going to be some pretty severe sanctions, but they are talking that they're not going to bring the club to its knees because of it, but, there's obviously going to be changes there.
It'd be interesting to see what points deduction. I think that's probably the one. Fines, we'll sit there, okay. But, that's going to be the one. That's going to show off how fair income they are.
Absolutely.
Golf. Tiger and his son Charlie playing in the PNC Championship.
Yeah, they've paired together. This is a tournament that's run by the PGA for their players, but they also invite their sons and daughters that are involved in golf to come along to an event. I think they won it last year, or they went close to winning it last year. But what a great event where you can actually participate with a parent.
It's pretty unique, isn't it?
It is.
Probably shows how golf. It doesn't matter what age you are to play, and it's not like you're playing footy and your career finishes at footy in your 30s, as we know. Same thing, soccer, but golf, it doesn't really matter. So it is unique in that way.
There's not too many sports where you can say, father and son play in the same footy team. Usually when the father's about to retire, the young colt is coming up and probably playing his first A-grade game. It's just a unique event where it's great. I mean, there's probably only a couple of other sports that I can think of that might do that, but geez, what a great event. And Vijay Singh and his son ended up winning the event with Tiger and Charlie coming third. So great advertisement for the game, I think.
No, I think fantastic.
Mate, we move on to cricket. We'll have a look at the Test cricket first. The Test series against South Africa did not go to plan, ending in 2 days.
Look, I want to hear a few things here. Now, you consider this my bake if you want as well, the game of cricket in general. Now, it used to be a team would arrive, they would have the warm-up game, the social game in Lilac Hill. They would play a full-strength WA side, a full-strength South Australian side, and then Queensland and occasionally New South Wales as well before the first test. So everything was match-hardened. Now, it's one warm-up game against 11 blokes they get out of the bar, seemingly, like you and I can probably play in that.
Being kind.
And it's just the preparation is ridiculous, and it's become such a money game. So now, David Warner out of touch in terms of, can you drop him from the Test side? What are we doing at the moment?
We're playing Big Bash. Yeah. It seems like cricket as a whole is not on the same page worldwide, where players are almost flying in a week before they've got to play, expected to perform. And what made it worse was, which is our next point there, that the pitch wasn't up to standard.
No, it wasn't. It was too much in favour of the bowlers. But I do think both sides' batting was pretty average.
Yep. Travis Head was probably the only one who mastered it, really.
Travis Head and Steve Smith's partnership effectively won the game.
Yeah.
And I do think South Africa's batting is pretty thin anyway.
But their bowling attack is pretty good. So it's a bit of a balancing act there.
So, yes, the pitch wasn't good enough, but I don't think it was quite as bad as both teams' batting made out either. So.
Agreed. So Brisbane have received a strike or a demerit point that's got to last for 5 years. I think because of the weather situation that we've been having here in Australia hasn't helped the pitch at all, but then they are dropping them in these days. So
no,
you would
Queensland's not.
Right,
Queensland's not.
Right, that makes sense then.
Yeah, Queensland's not a drop in. And nor's the SCG. That's both. They've both stayed.
Yep.
Look, that question was whether it was brought up, and Queensland has said no, we can't defend ourselves on that. Mm-hmm. Look, it looked like a traditional Shield wicket. Those wickets are brought out for Shield games.
Yep.
And quite often there are results in 2 and 3 days, and it shows Queensland and WA with their advantage with their being able to prepare the bouncy deck in WA and then the sea movement in Queensland. So you get the results.
Yeah, but it was as green as the outfield, though. That was the problem.
It was quite bizarre. You looked at it beforehand and going, geez, now, I've been around the traps and watched a lot of cricket, and I'm going, wow.
I haven't got a big backyard, but I reckon the grass in my backyard might have been a little bit better prepared than what it was. But, hey, it's interesting.
I think they were very lucky to get only an average and not a poor.
Yes.
So I do think they were a bit lucky there, but look.
The stadium's going to be ripped up in 3 years anyway for the Commonwealth Games, so it's not going to matter too much.
For the Olympics, yeah.
For the Olympics. What do we expect out of the Boxing Day test, which is coming up this weekend coming?
It is interesting because the Boxing Day pitch in Melbourne, they've managed to get some life back into it. Now, they're probably at the moment desperately trying to prepare a road so to get the game to go longer.
Yes.
I think we all got to wait and see. Hazelwood v Boland. I think it should be Boland.
I'm in agreement there as well. I think you go with a form player.
I think he's earned his spot.
With a ridiculous test average of 10.
Yeah, and let's forget, he's considered the MCG specialist. Get 6 for 7 last year. I don't think you can leave him out.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting call, and I know that a few of the Brett Lee and a few of the other players were sort of pondering over that little conundrum that who's going to play, whether it's going to be Boland or Hazelwood. So, all right, mate, we better get off to a quick break, but when we come back, we'll have a little bit of a look at the World Cup.
You're listening to the Game On Podcast. We'll be right back after this short break.
So, Argentina, get the job done.
They do. We sat here last week. You picked. I can't remember who we picked.
Now. It wasn't Argentina. Put it that way.
You picked France. I picked Argentina, and we sort of said, well, maybe it's going to be a draw. And guess what? We got a 3-3 draw, and it was a thrilling game, wasn't it?
It was a fantastic game. Some brilliant goals. One of Argentina's goals was actually just no, it was France actually, was perfection to the millimetre in terms of the passing of the ball,
yes.
And was impossible to defend. It was brilliant. So a fantastic game.
And a great advertisement for the game, obviously,
it was.
With everything that had been going on. There were question marks about playing in Qatar. I think they were allayed in the end because the football really spoke for itself.
And Messi certainly put himself up in the talking of the greatest of all time.
I agree.
He's certainly right up there.
To listen to some of his story and some of the background in that, as a youngster, he was a little bit undersized and had to take some growth hormones to assist that as well. Then having to leave Argentina, fantastic achievement. And, what's scary about that is that these guys play together, Mbappe and Messi play together in the same side, which is just scary when you really think about it. But, gee, a 3-3 draw and obviously a penalty shootout, I don't think you could have asked for anything more, really.
Yeah, whether you do, I'd love to come up with a method where it wasn't a penalty shootout and that. Do you go to 9v9 or something? I'm not convinced on the penalty shootout, but what a great game overall.
Australia moves up in the rankings as well, which just looking at the rankings over the last 12 years, they're incrementally moving up that list to number 11, I believe, in the world at the moment.
Look, fantastic. And I think we're all Arnold before the World Cup.
I think he's the man, isn't he?
Well, you can't argue against that result. Australia didn't have a Tim Cahill or a Viduka, Kuehl player. So I think in a lot of regards, it is our greatest achievement at a World Cup.
I think he utilised the players that he had at the right times. You look at someone like Goodwin comes on, provides that little bit of spark. A couple of other players that they slotted into the side at various stages, and they had a big impact on the results. I think it is a great result for Australia.
Yeah, and Bappe, whether at 24 years old,
he's only 24, mate.
It's scary.
It is
his
scary.
Skill, it's just remarkable, and it was. They call it the beautiful game or the world game, and the beautiful of it.
He certainly makes
it was
look,
fantastic.
Yeah, he certainly makes it look very good. Already got a World Cup under his belt, so runner up this time round. But he's got a long way to go in his career. All right, we move on to the Big Bash. We sat here last week. You were heading off to the first Strikers game. Well, gee whiz, a lot's happened since that first game.
Yeah, great start for the season. The bizarre thing of last Friday night, Sydney Thunder. So we've only made 139.
Yes.
We were all thinking, well, that's not enough.
No, we have to bowl well to keep it tight. Yes.
And 2 for 5. Hale's still in though. Yeah. 2 minutes later, 4 for 5.
Yep.
6 for 9. Yep. 7 for 10.
Where's it going?
They recovered V8 for 14, the inside edge from Doggett, and I actually know a guy who'd backed Russo for the Rosario, however you pronounce Riley Rousseau, for top score. And at that stage with 3, he was. So it was actually quite amusing that he only lost on an inside edge for 4 to Doggett. So it was extraordinary. It was quite bizarre. The catch by Short at first slip
was an absolute cracker, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a great catch. And they did bowl, and everything went to hand. It was one of those things. But
their line and length was very, very good. Everyone seemed to be hitting the spots. And then, basically anywhere that the Sydney Thunder hit it found a fieldsman.
And we bowled him out for 15, and Rashid Khan hasn't bowled a ball. Extraordinary.
That is crazy.
Bizarre.
I think it's going to be a record that is going to stand for a very, very long time.
I will say I did go on Tuesday night as well. The Thunder look a little bit like Hale out, all out, that they are relying on him a fair bit. But we'll have another add one here. Chris Green's captaincy on Tuesday night, he would have sunk Popeye in the Torrens. It was that bad. How in the hell, when it gets down to needing a run or so of ball,
they push the field back and then
why not try and keep the new guy on strike?
Move them back.
It was bizarre.
Yeah. Yeah, it was almost like trying to save face, almost going, well, it's a close victory, a couple of balls to go, but you lost by 4 wickets. I mean,
it was weird.
And the Strikers were in control the entire time, really, at the end of the day.
I couldn't get it. Look, clever batting by Short. There was no doubt he targeted Sam's and the short boundary.
I think the mix for the Strikers at the moment is quite right. And, they haven't had to rely on Rashid Khan for that little bit of magic game in, game out. But they also don't have him as well for the entire tournament.
No.
So this is a good sign.
Yeah, and give Peter Siddle his due with Capsy the other night, changed it up. Gronholm bowled 4, short bowl 3. We took the pace off the ball a fair bit.
Yep.
But Agar had gone for 26 off 2, so probably just played a bit smarter. And certainly the guy captain better on the night won the game.
Absolutely. Just a side note to the Big Bash, the Australian women's cricket team had a young lady taking a hat-trick.
Yeah, Helen Graham. And ironically, the only other previous player was Schultz, Megan Schultz, our Adelaide Strikers lady.
Yep.
And ironically, in the same ground in India.
Unbelievable.
So,
I didn't know that fact, so well done. Also, McGrath was captaining, I believe, this game.
Taylor McGrath.
So, a little bit of a Adelaide connection there, obviously, with the Strikers as well.
Yeah, great stuff. 4-1 series win to the win too, overall, when it was 1-1. And, yeah, so a great result.
Absolutely.
Now, Glenelg, mate.
Yeah, SANFL news. Last night, I think news came over the airways that Darren Reeves, who had been an assistant coach, I think, and a reserves coach at North Adelaide, has got the gig at Glenelg.
Yeah, it's an interesting appointment. Look, I'm personally, I will, show my hand that I am a Brett Hand fan and believe he's been hung out to dry by 3 players, and I think the club was a bit weak. That's my own opinion.
Yep.
So we'll just have to wait and see how that goes.
Nord's premiership defence obviously starts, it has started with the pre-season. I saw a little clip online that they were doing a bit of beach work, and Twig was really impressive about talking about how, 2022 is 2022. We're really steaming ahead and looking at 2023.
Yeah, no, the mail so far is pretty positive. A lot of recruits. So, look, we couldn't believe that Jack Saunders got cut by Hawthorn as a Nord man. And
it's our benefit,
more
really.
Than happy to have Jack, and Jackson Callow's looking pretty good as well. Fantastic. So that's great news.
And the SNFLW draw was released. I think Nord are playing North at Nord Oval.
Yeah, first five rounds have been released. So I would have thought, why not release it all? But yeah, so footy's not too far away.
Absolutely. All right, mate, we'll take another quick break. When we come back, we've got our Past Players and Past Legends series.
You're listening to the Game On podcast. We'll be right back after this short break.
Has there ever been anything that has lightened up your day? Whether it was someone who complimented you or maybe you got a promotion at work, these all make you feel happiness. But if you're looking for more to lighten up your day, then you should book our mobile coffee service. We are always dedicated to one thing: service. We appeal to all sorts of people, from commuters on their way to work or our regular workplace coffee stops. And best of all, we visit you. Whether it's our top quality and aromatic coffee or our mouth-watering selection of cakes and food, there will always be something for you to enjoy. Servicing Adelaide's metro area. Why not book in a stop today? Find us on Facebook and send us a message. Tour Coffee and Catering. We deliver your daily caffeine fix.
Past players, past legends, past legends.
We welcome Neville Rocky Roberts, one of the all-time greats. 98 games, 198 goals for West Torrens, 48 games, 81 goals for Richmond, 75-77, including 6 for Victoria, playing centre in a state game. And then, of course, for the magnificent Redlegs, 108 games, 413 goals. Overall, 254 games, 692 goals. Leading goal kicker, 4 times at Nord. Century, Nord Team of the Century, Nord Hall of Fame, South Australian Football Hall of Fame in 2006, one of the all-time greats. Welcome, Neville Rocky Roberts. Obviously, Nord, Richmond and West Torrens superstar. Welcome aboard, Rock.
Rulebook, always good. Glad to talk to you.
Yes, and we're on a combined time space tonight, so we're probably going to race through a little bit quicker than we do normally. But Neville, the superstar junior, at Henley High, even your first game for West Torrens BOG against Geelong. Give us an overview of your early career and then the decision to go to Richmond.
I can't believe you remember that Geelong game, but
Come on, Ricky, you know
I
me
shouldn't
better
be
than that.
surprised.
Yes.
Shouldn't be surprised. Oh, look, I played. I played junior football like every other player does, and went through Henley High School, which is, I guess, in later times become quite popular for producing good players. But we had a fantastic football program in those days, but there wasn't a pathway or an outcome that you could expect. So identification really came directly from the clubs, and I've got to say that if it wasn't for the West Torrens Footy Club, like a lot of players, I might have slipped through the system and not played league football at all. But so I'm greatly indebted to them and picking me up and showing me a pathway. And so I had a 2-year stint with them before going to Richmond, and then it's history. I came back. I captained West Torrens for 70, I came back from Richmond in 78, 9, and 80, 81. I captained the club for a couple of years, 80, 81, and then went to Norwood.
Out of that, Neville, I'll quite up jump in here and say that Neville wouldn't have left West Torrens if the administration had been more stable and decision-based, had been more professional. I'll add that. You don't have to comment on that, Neville, but it's obviously something I hate the word traitor being bashed about, where people don't understand which things are happening, how poorly clubs are run at times.
Oh, look, I think it's a fair comment. And look, to this day, there are people at the West Torrens Footy Club and they are champions of the club. Johnny Graham is a champion of the West Torrens Footy Club. He's, he has been an incredible proprietor of past players, and he's tried to protect what was the origins of the West Torrens Footy Club prior to the merger. And he protects that like his own territory, and like the warrior he was when he played, and I respected him. I wore his jumper before I played for West Torrens, and he was a hero of mine. If you asked him today what his view of me, he'd call me a traitor. And I get it, but I think it's time for Johnny to put down the weapons and give me a hug and say, well, look, I'm really sad you left us, but I understand to some degree. I'll probably never forgive you, but mate, we're short in life and long in memory. I think it's a little bit disappointing for me to not be able to celebrate my time at West Torrens because of things like that. But I think John will come around eventually. Anyway, I'll make him come around. But look, those days were fantastic, and we played a different and had a different environment and a quite different, if you like, community in football as compared to today. So, I was fortunate to end up, obviously, over time at Norwood, and the obvious followed. I had the success I was looking for.
And your time at Richmond, let's not forget, you decided to cross to Richmond as a kid still, really, going to a club who's won back-to-back premierships. Now, there's people out there who don't realise how successful Neville was at Richmond. Let's remember that he did get picked to play for Victoria. Back then when you were only allowed to play 2 players per side, so Francis Burt was captain. So Neville got picked for Victoria in front of Kevin Bartlett, Royce Hart, etc., and kicked the casual 6 goals playing centre in a state game against Western Australia. And
it's a pretty handy effort.
You know, your second year, especially with Ruck Roving at Richmond and establish yourself, you made the decision to come back. Richmond were desperate to keep you.
Yeah, you've got fantastic factual information, and I guess when you put it in a synoptic explanation like that, where it seems so simple, you would say, why in God's name wouldn't you have ever come back to Adelaide? And sometimes I ask the question, and sometimes I regret it. Sometimes I say, well, be careful what you wish for. Yeah. You know, we know the story of Peter Motley. We know, we all think that things might have been different if we'd made other decisions, but we'll never know. But look, I was incredibly fortunate to
to get drafted or picked by Richmond when they were winning premierships. I was incredibly fortunate to be, picked in a Victorian state team prior to State of Origin ahead of, Sproul, Bartlett, Sheedy, Clay, Richardson. I mean, all of those guys. I mean, it was just ridiculous. Tommy Hafey was the coach, but I've got to say that I won't let my ego get the better of me here. But in my second year, I understood what was required. I was a kid when I went there. I was only 19, but I got it. And I've got to say that if you ever recognise the peak of your time in football, I think at 21, 22, I really got it. And I had an extraordinary mentor in Francis Burke, who gave me was a mentor and gave me a philosophy for life, which was simply make no excuses. There are no excuses. And I treated that advice, and I took it to the field, I took it to life, I took it to everything. And it's been my, a fabric of everything I've done. But I was incredibly fortunate to have all of those experiences at such a young age. And I've got to say, even running out for Victoria, I looked at the jumper before I put it on, and I thought, you got to be kidding me. In God's name, at 20 years of age, am I putting this thing on? But anyway, it happened, and I'm forever grateful.
Was it at your time at Richmond that you struck up a friendship with Neil Baum?
Absolutely. He was the sexiest thing going around in Melbourne at the time. He was huge. I mean, everyone wanted a piece of Barmy, and he was long hair and had the best looking girl in the town and all that sort of stuff going on. And we all thought, God, we're lucky to know him. But he was a bit of a larrikin, and he loved a beer. And we, in those days, got away with having a social life as well as a football life. And Barmy he was the head of the pack, and we became incredibly close. I think for chemistry, a bit of him looking after me. And the first game we played my game was at Fitzroy. My first game. They'd won the year before in '74, and a fight broke out, and I was playing the forward pocket, and Barmy was resting at full forward, and Sheedy got hit over the head by a bloody umbrella from a spectator or something, and the whole thing just went berserk. And I sort of thought I'd better run down, and Barmy said, hey, where you going? I said, I said, nah. He said, let's stay here. There's plenty of action. There's plenty of action going on here when it stops, and we might get the benefit of it. Anyway, free kick, ball in the square. Barmy takes the catch, kicks a goal. He said, "See what I told you, champ."
And a bit of irony there with your friendship with Barmy, because if that hadn't happened, you may have ended up, and you can explain to people why, you may have ended up playing for Port Adelaide.
Absolutely. I got recruited by Richmond and when I was playing for West Torrens, and I flew over and back every week. And it was like a James Bond film. I flew over to Melbourne, and then I got a helicopter to the Yarra and went to bloody Punt Road by taxi. It was quite incredible to get there, but I had lectures and things, so they were sympathetic to that. And that's how I started my career at Richmond. It was, really spectacular how Richmond were prepared to let me study in Adelaide and do all that sort of stuff. So the first year we had finals, and West Torrens weren't in the finals. But remember, I was flying over and back, so I was training to Torrens. I had nowhere to train, and I was still at university. So Port Adelaide, who I knew Jack and I knew Russell Ebert really well, and Richmond approached him and said, can he train there? And I did. And so consequently, I developed an incredibly good relationship with those guys for that final series. Go forward 3 or 4 years, I'm back in Adelaide. I've gone from West Torrens to Norwood. Jack hears that Jack Cale hears that I'm thinking of going to Norwood, and puts his hand out. And John Cale is a very, very personable man. He's a very charismatic guy, and I have no doubt why he was a champion coach. He put people together. He he solidified it with his management, his character, all those sorts of things. But the one thing he had in common with the great coaches at the time, like Barassi and Hafey and Curley, was that they actually demanded that the top 8 or 9 players drive the whole scene. So, if you're a senior player at Richmond or Port or Nord, whatever, that was how it worked. You drove the club, and these coaches were really good, like, Carl and all that. So Jack had a crack at me, but it was really my relationship with Barmy. In the end, I said, no, I've got to go to Nord.
And getting you over the line to get to the parade was interesting. Wally Miller had to be convinced.
Look, there's no doubt, as a young man, I was probably a bit full of myself and believed all the press. And when I came back from Richmond, there was a lot of hype and all the Rocky stuff. And, it was a bit silly. But look, as a 21 or 3-year-old or whatever it was, I'd probably forgive myself for being a bit caught up in it all. And that didn't sit well with Nord, because Nord was more of a conservative club. And I think if I was really honest, I probably became a bit of an individual rather than a team player. And I think that was a sort of a consequence of all the attention I got. And I probably look back on that and say, look, I should have been smarter. But notwithstanding that, Norwood really wouldn't tolerate that. And Wally said, we want you, but we don't want Rocky. And I said, well, that's your problem. That's your problem, not mine, because I can't stop it. And today we still laugh about it.
So obviously you moved to Nord in 1982 and tasted a bit of success quite quickly.
Well, we did, and it was just quite incredible to say that the reasons I left West Torrens, I was captain, all that sort of stuff, and people are still wearing, young kids are still wearing your duffel coat. I mean, that's a really emotional thing. People would not probably maybe appreciate how difficult it is when you're captain of a club and you've got all this, admiration from young people to what appears to be turn your back on them. It was a really big deal. And right up to the last minute, I probably wouldn't have gone if it wasn't for Barmy ringing me and say, look, you sort of have to be a bit selfish about your life and what you achieve in life. And you can be loyal and stay with the Eagles and do all that, and we'd appreciate that, and we wouldn't have any regrets. But I think you've really got to examine your own mind and the identity you want in football and what you want to be remembered for, and that is to be the best you can be in the best possible environment. And I had to make decisions about those things, which were a little bit political and weren't easy, but I did and went. And first year, I got absolutely, indemnified, I guess, my decision to leave in the sense that it was endorsed by a premiership.
And we came home with a train in 82. All the comments made, and we said at Nord we underachieved and all that. I admit, Neville, I've probably softened that stance over the years. You think 82, the qualifying final against Sturt, we were down in the last quarter. The second semi against Port hit the front in the last quarter. And then in 84, with the history makers thing, we were gone against Centrals in the first semi and managed to get out of jail in the last 5 minutes. So I've probably eased off a bit on that, and I think we probably don't show enough respect to how bloody strong the competition was overall.
Oh, it was incredible. It's easy to look at the AFL now and see us as a secondary competition, but when I went to Richmond, there was really, it was an equitable competition between Melbourne, Tasmania, us, and SNFL and Waffle. And, I went, but I came back. And, everyone forgets, when I offer a regret about coming back, great mates of mine like Barmy and Barry Richardson and others who are Francis Burke say, well, quite frankly, there was not much between us. I mean, we were beating them at State of Origin and doing all that sort of stuff. So it's easy, it was easy to make those decisions now. But right now, to make that, comparison is unfair. What I regret now about the whole Australian situation with football is that because we're not in the AFL, all of us, other than the AFL, are worthless. Yeah. And we're not part of the deal. Well, Well, it is garbage, and I say, I've got mates in the AFL, as you know, rule book, and I've said to them as recently as 5 months ago, what about why did you? What about if why did we not do our own competition? Why didn't we just say, well, we'll have a national league and we'll start with Norwood, Port, Sturt, whoever. Why do you guys get to do it? Yeah. And no one's got an answer for that. No. Who made them the owners of football in Australia? So all of a sudden, South Melbourne, Fitzroy, Brisbane, Collingwood, all of a sudden they're the only clubs that actually matter. And all of the other, look at Norwood, look at its history, look at this fantastic bloody brand. And all of a sudden, what are we? We're an amateur league club playing in, I hate that.
Yep, likewise.
And I've got the last thing I want to do in football, and I've probably even never said this to our president, is I want to see Norwood in national competition because it doesn't deserve to have its brand disrespected by everybody and its players.
Yeah, I get that, Neville, but I'm still a little bit. I admit, I wish the AFL had never started. Personally, I loved when the SANFL was the big deal here. So I'm showing my age and old-fashioned side of things and that. But I love being a part of Norwood Football Club. Being in Norwood tonight, being with Vanna and Paul Dealio and all that. You're actually a person where at an AFL level, you're just a number. You're member number 3,817. Where at Norwood, I'm part of Norwood Football Club, where for me that's still big. But, yeah, so I see where that's coming. We're coming from
Robert,
as well.
You're right. Look, let me be very clear. The Norwood Footy Club, run by Paul and Fanta, we have got it right from the top down. We are cherry ripe. We have no dickheads in our club. We're heavily managed. We've got an incredibly good coach. We've got great coaches. Our players are respectful and good people and all that sort of stuff. So guess what? You win a flag. Well, I'm not surprised at that because we got everything right, and it doesn't happen often. But I think in relation to what you're saying, we as a club probably have a penchant to say, well, we deserve with our brand and everything to be playing at the highest level of competition, and that's not happening for us. So it's going to be a lagging and I think endemic problem in our club, in our personalities, that we will want that to happen because we want to be in the best competition. But having said all of that, we are the best. We have proved last year, with respect to the other clubs, we were the best in that competition, and that's the best we can do. It's but I respect what you were saying, Rulebook. I probably don't think much differently.
Yeah. Now back to your own career, Neville. People out there, the professionalism of Neville Roberts and Norwood Football Club and that, but the professionalism of Neville Roberts and Michael H together. Now, Pete, what used to happen, they'd end up training and they would boot the crap out of the ball the distance we are apart now. Mm-hmm. And in the hands, and it'd be the one who'd drop the first ball had to buy lunch the next day or whenever they were.
Yep.
I admit, I stayed at Norwood one night, and I was the only person still there, for 40 minutes. They were over 1,000, and they were booting the living daylights out of each other, and it showed where Neville was so good in front of his body and the hands. Yep. And I love the bit too. Neither Aishi or Neville are on Facebook, so something will come up, and I'll send it through to the two of them. And then I just sit back and piss myself laughing the rest of the day at the game of tennis at the bullshit back and forth between the two of them. And I just sit in the middle and get the benefit of the entertainment. Yep. So, yeah.
Well, I suppose, does that correlate with kicking 117 goals in 1983?
Oh, look, I think it's a rule of 10,000, guys. I mean, I'm helping twig a little bit with some of our kids.
Yeah, I was going to come back to that. Yes.
Yeah, but I think one of the things I tell them is we get the process and the routine right and all that sort of stuff, but it's fine to sort of have a process or have a plan, or in relation to kicking goals and doing other things or catching balls. But if you don't actually practice it, the rule of 10,000 is basically that you've got to do something 10,000 times for it to become innate, to become part of your personality, so you don't actually think about it. The reality is that back then, that little program I did with AC, I did at Richmond with Francis Burke, who's just one of the great immortals of the Richmond Footy Club. And we used to do that after night at Punt Road, and it's smash, smash, smash. And I lived with Francis, so, I had to pay a price at home, wash the dishes or do whatever I had to do with him and Kerry. But the reality of it is that it was just watch the ball hit your hands. And if I got one message for kids, it's always, watch the ball hit your hands. And the kids think, they sort of look at it, but they don't look at it. Watch it like you can't look at anything else. And that was what that taught us. And AC and I did that. We had another competition where we kicked the ball 40 metres and we had to step more than a metre either side. We had this bet. I think AC owes me about $400,000. He'll never pay it. Little prick.
It's that one. I do it as well with coaching. I've done a kids cricket coaching clinic this week. What do you catch the ball with? And of course, the kids all answer. Well, in your hands. Say no. Come on, keep going.
With your eyes, yeah.
And then I make them close their eyes. We'll catch the ball without the eye. And it is watch the ball was the most common. It's the three words we use the most. Whatever coaching we're doing.
I remember my time out at Nord. They'd make you read the gauge of the ball basically into your hands, which was always a good one for me.
Now, Neville, your involvement this year back at the parade, so came in involved with the forwards probably about halfway through the year, roughly.
Oh, a bit later, but probably 60%.
Yep. And so Neville was watching games, reviewing, trying to get our forward movement a bit better, which and that side of things. Now, Neville, were you thinking exactly the same thing I was when Ben Jarvis, who you'd been doing a fair bit of work with, when Jarvo had the kick 50-odd metres out, my first thought was, leave the language out, he's this far out because it'll make him kick through it. And I'm thinking, just do what Neville has been working with. Was in my thought process as he came in. And, of course, 50 metres out, he launched it.
Jeez, he nailed it, didn't he?
And if he'd been 30 out...
Different story, maybe.
I wouldn't have been backing him with my wallet, sort of thing. And I, as he kicked that and it's gone through, I will say, you bloody beauty, Neville Roberts. I did think of that at the time.
Well, I reckon you got to shift your focus back to Ben, and he is a really tough head.
He's a good kid.
He's essentially really he's a tough-minded young fellow, and he's essentially a very skilled forward who can kick goals from basically anywhere. So my job really was to sort of try and get a process that sort of protected him under pressure. When the thing about a process or a routine is to take away the pressure of the man on the mark, the white noise that's going on around you, can I kick it, can I? Having a process, it means you go into another room, do all that sort of. Anyway, Ben got that quickly, and that essentially was my role. But you can't, it's no merit to me. It's really a merit to the kids who look at it and say, well, I get what Neville's trying to tell us, and I'll take it on board, and hopefully it makes me better. I say to people now, and it's as easy for us now to say, shit, you don't want Ben Jarvis's kick, but if you get it, meaning you don't want that last kick in a grand final, but if you get it, you don't want to not be able to kick it. You need to have the skills, and you need to have the process to do it. So, look, the reality of it was that he was up to the challenge, and probably would have been anyway. But I think one of the great things with Ben is that he doesn't suffer pressure too badly, and I think giving him a process gave him a little bit more protection from that sort of pressure. And but having said all of that, mate, it's still a huge kick, isn't it? Outside 50, 8 points down or whatever it was, and what an incredible get for a young man. I mean, and Yeah, I'll tell you a story. There's a young kid at Norwood called Luke Sermon, and he's a good man, and he had a good final in a lot of ways, but missed 3 goals.
Yep.
So within 2 weeks of that final being finished, he rang me and said, I'd like to try and straighten up and do this. So we met regularly 2 or 3 times. We took twice a week for several times before now, and I'm really happy with how he's going. But he did say, if we hadn't have won that grand final, I wouldn't have slept for 1,000 years. And because he missed goals probably that he thought he should have kicked. Interesting, isn't it?
He's a complex. He really means well, Luke. He's a complex kid. Yeah,
but to show initiative like that's fantastic. I think that's great.
I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, likewise. Righto, Neville, we'll keep going because there's a couple of things we've got to mention. Obviously, the history-making premiership in '84, captain in the club, and then I'll then back in. I thought you were treated disgracefully as coach. That losing final, turned up, got back to Nord. I ended up spending most of that night with you, and I thought it was disgraceful that you were nearly ostracised. I felt that night, and I may have told a few people that night as well. So that probably wasn't the best chapter at Nord, but the '84 and then captain in the club. Of course, captaining South Australia. Go for it, Rock.
Oh, yeah, look, I think captaining South Australia was an incredible honour, and it's a bit personal, it's a bit private and all that, but, it was a fantastic evolution and part of my footy career, and playing State of Origin was extraordinary. They were incredible games at Adelaide, as we all remember. They were packed out, and they were what they were, and, that remains a highlight. I think, the coaching Nord was, again, it's an incredible honour to coach a club with that sort of brand, and what followed from it was probably more a management issue, and I wouldn't hold back from saying that we weren't well managed then, and there were people who had the one thing about footy clubs that never ceases to amaze me is when they're not going well, it's generally because presidents and others, they're barrackers, they're footy pervs. They want to hang around with blokes who have got profiles and they want to barrack for the club. We've got people involved in our club now as serious management people, serious administrators. They don't barrack. They don't wear club blazers to go to lunches. It's a more serious environment than that. And I think back when I was coaching, we essentially suffered fools. And I probably should have been smart. I've been in business all my life. Should have put myself in that environment. I got what I deserved, in the sense that I, put myself in that environment with people who I probably shouldn't have trusted to do what they said they were going to do. I'm not saying that I was better than I was as a coach. I mean, we weren't a complete failure, but as you know, and I think, without defending myself, you go from not coaching to coaching. You need 3 years to learn what's going on. I mean, the first time an ex-player or a potential coach steps into the box to coach, he has no idea what he's doing. He looks at the game and says, "Holy shit, I'm looking at this as a player." It takes a year before you look at as a coach. And then in my second year, I was lucky enough to be able to convince Michael Taylor to come back to the club, which was fantastic because he is just the greatest man, and I love him, and a great mate. And he helped me immensely and taught me to think as a coach because he'd been with the Crows and all that sort of stuff. So, look, lessons in life, rule book, we move past them, and I say, well, I was probably in the wrong place at the wrong time, but, I'm lucky. It will always be recorded that I coached the Norwood Footy Club, and what a great honour that was.
Now, Pete, there was one funny bit with Rock in terms of, or a couple, but I walked in and walked upstairs at the Cathedral, the Richmond game, and it turns out Neville's being interviewed by Dale Waitman upstairs. And I walk in and Neville sees me walking, he's gone, "Shit, I better not make any mistakes in my career now because this prick's better than I am." And there's all these people staring at what the hell's just happened? And then Neville gets to the Nord bit. He said at Nord, and I'm yelling out, "Take your time, Rock. This could go for half an hour at least." And these Richmond people are staring at, who in the effing hell is this idiot? Sort of thing. And, of course, greatly, Jeff Wilson and I always greatly appreciate you for the room that night at Richmond and those couple of nights in over in 83.
You're very welcome.
We're an education in life, to say the least, those couple of weeks, Rock.
Oh, well, it's,
goes on tour, stays on tour.
Absolutely, and you're very welcome.
Mate, I'll just go back very, very quickly. My favourite grand final, obviously, was the history-making 84 grand final. Mate, Port Adelaide, the arch enemy, so to speak. What are your memories of that day?
Oh, incredibly. We managed to just make the finals by the skin of our teeth. So from about 4 games out of the final series, we were playing grand finals every week, and then obviously through the final series, every game was a knockout game. So we became tougher and tougher and tougher. But the one thing that I think that probably eludes everybody is we didn't have any injuries. I mean, I don't know how you play so many hard games. I think we had one injury. It might have been.
We were very settled.
Where we were, I mean, it was Vardas or someone had an injury.
Rowan Hellier got injured.
Oh, Hellier, that's right.
Jarvo came back.
That's right. So incredibly lucky to have that run, but I think as the games progressed and we went through, Glenelg or South, whatever.
South Central Glenelg was the order.
Yeah, so they were all close. They were all tough. They were all on nail biters, and so I think what happened was that they was a bit like swimming 5 laps today, 10 laps next week, 30 laps a week after. We just became stronger. And we handled pressure better. And when it came to the final, we're 8 points down going to the last quarter. We had absolutely no doubt we're going to win it. I could just often think about why in God's name were we so confident we're going to win this? We're 8 points down. That's 2 goals. We're going to kick 2 before they do anything. But it was just almost in our heads that we own this. We're going to take this. This belongs to us.
Well, the Central's first semi, we were nearly 3 goals down with 5 or so minutes to go.
I know.
That was
reminiscent of this year's final.
Yeah,
grand
it was.
Final.
There were certain similarities there. And then the prelim final, let's be honest, I'm not exactly upset. Glenelg were 2 goals 14 at one stage, so that didn't hurt. So, and then the grand final against Port is still, I think, the 73, Glenelg North, and the 84 are the two
big
grand
ones
finals for me. 84 is a biased Nord man, yes, but I still think they're the 2 great. And look, I have 1980 up there where Nord, we nearly grabbed the victory where we were underdog against a great Port side as another great grand final. So I'm showing there that probably at least a bit of balance there, that Port did win that game, but 73 and 84 are the 2 for me.
Certainly consistent through those 5 or 6 years, through 78 to 84.
Look, I think if you look back on that period between 80 and 86, I said to Twig the other night in front of the other coaches, I think it's a bit embarrassing that we didn't actually do better in that window than just 2 flags. I mean,
but as I said, let's do remember that 82, the qualifying against Sturt, we were down by 15 points in the last quarter. So I did used to have that thought process, and then I thought, and I've actually spoken about that with Barmy in terms of going, well, hang on, 82, 84, there's times we certainly weren't going to win in those 2. So I just think we probably, Nord, we're a proud club, we'd go at ourselves, but I show more respect now overall to the competition. I think how good North Adelaide and Glenelg were in that era as well.
Oh, look, they were very strong.
West Adelaide in 83 were the best forward line overall. They were an incredible side in 83.
Well, we lost to them in a prelim and they won it. But,
no, we lost the second semi.
Look, as you know, it's easy to go back and be retrospective, and we're all smarter in hindsight. But you're only as good as the performance on the day. And I was very, very pleased having made the move north that we picked up a couple of flags in the last part of my career.
And you were very emotional grand final day. It was a pleasure. You're not great at looking for a camera afterwards, Rock. That wasn't your strength. But, yes, look, we're still celebrating as far as I'm concerned at Nord at the moment. Greatly appreciated too, Neville, and that for tonight. And obviously greatly appreciate your friendship over the years, etc.
Oh, look, mate, you're very welcome, and you're a great Norwood man, and you make a lot of contributions there, gratuitously and generously, and it's greatly appreciated. So we'll catch up soon, no doubt. Thanks, mate.
Thank you, Rocky. Thank you for joining us tonight, mate.
You're welcome. All the best. Bye, boys.
We've just been speaking to Rocky Roberts. Mate, I have to change your name from the rule book to the encyclopedia. You are a wealth of knowledge when it comes to stats.
Yeah, it's not. I wish I'd been a bit better at schoolwork than the stats, but yeah, I admit, don't lose too many footy arguments or bets, mate.
Rocky was fantastic in talking about his time over in Victoria with Richmond, at the Richmond Footy Club. His great mate in Neil Baum, who sort of got him over to Norwood. Gee, I didn't realise he could have ended up at Port Adelaide. That's an amazing story.
Yes, it's probably not that well known, that one. So, yeah, thought it was time that we let that one out of the bag.
All right, mate, we'll move on now. We've got David Stevens coming up. We might just squeeze him in now. We're following up on Sean Tasker's chat last week about Neuroflex, and we're lucky enough to have David Stevens, Head of Research for Neuroflex, on the line. Thanks, mate, for joining us.
No, thank you for having me.
Welcome, David.
Mate, brain injuries at the moment, obviously such a big topic to do with concussion and everything like that. And as we've seen throughout the social media posts lately, that a lot of clubs are getting on board with Neuroflex.
Look, that's correct. A lot of clubs and a lot of different sports, ranging from sort of rugby union, rugby league, AFL, all the way up to we are allowed to talk about this now, but we were recently used at the FIFA World Cup. For their sort of post-match concussion assessments. I should stipulate when the player came off the field.
Yeah, obviously soccer or the world game is quite big, but being here locally in South Australia, obviously Aussie Rules and SANFL is quite big, and I see you've got a few SANFL clubs that you've been working with.
Yeah, look, I mean, this year we did a lot of work with Norwood, Sturt, North Adelaide, but as well, importantly, the local teams as well. So the Gamaraka Magpies, the Adelaide University, and even the St Bernard's Old Collegians in Victoria. They essentially trialled the utilisation of the Neuroflex to help improve their concussion sort of protocols. And the results were very well received, and they were presented at this year's Concussion Sport Conference in Amsterdam.
Fantastic. Yeah, I certainly know that with Nick Pedro, unfortunately, having to retire from just persistent headaches, but I certainly know that the research was used a fair bit with the decisions with Nick, and he had to stop work for a while as well. It's been, he's a really nice guy, and just pretty. More importantly, it was life issues coming into play. Like he shattered that he can't play footy, but there's more important things in life than footy.
Yeah, look, that's correct. I mean, I'm not going to sort of comment on individual sort of players.
Yep.
But certainly there does seem to be a growing awareness amongst a lot of athletes, not just AFL, but in all sports of I guess the long-term dangers of trying to play through these injuries. And it is good that there has been this shift away from sort of, toughing it out and getting back on the field to, we're going to make sure we look after ourselves. And if it means, a lot of the players sort of accepted they have to have another week or two on the sideline, then but if that means they can then actually get back to 100% and take the field and be at 100% on the field, then that's worth it. So it's been good to see that shift in sports.
So just going back a little bit, mate, just talking about your expertise in this field, I've got here on my notes that you did a PhD at Sydney University.
That's correct. So my PhD was in the scientific way to describe it as cerebrovascular physiology, but I looked at exercise-induced changes in brain blood flow and how that affected cognitive and motor performance. And so that's sort of laid the foundations for my interest in all things sort of neurology and neurology related. Through a weird turn of events, I ended up falling into sleep research, and that's what brought me to Adelaide. I worked at Flinders University at the Adelaide Institute for Sleep Health, and one of my main research areas was sleep and acquired brain injury. Yep. And one of my projects that was supported by the Flinders Foundation and by the Breakthrough Mental Health Foundation was looking at the interplay between sleep and concussion. And what really struck me about concussion was just the lack of any sort of diagnostic tool for it. The SCAT-5, as it is, I mean, it's a glorified questionnaire. Now, yep. To be fair to the field, prior to the advent of technology, that really was the best we had. So concussions are a metabolic injury, really. You do have cellular level damage to what we call the axons in your brain, and that's what sort of connects all the different parts of your brain. But you can't see these on any form of neuroimaging. Yep. And so, as I said, we just, prior to the advent of technology like Neuroflex, we just didn't have that ability to objectively measure concussions. But thankfully, we do have that ability now, and it certainly has been embraced by sports like AFL.
So taking it through, what would be a standard test 10 years ago versus what you guys are doing at Neuroflex?
So look, 10 years ago and even before that, so the original sports concussion assessment tool was developed in 2002. It would examine a range of symptoms, any headaches, any dizziness, any memory problems. It would then do very sort of basic memory, word recall, number recall, months of the year backwards. And then it would then do, again, sort of basic balance tests, which give you a sort of a gross idea of just the level of neurological impairment, and also very, very basic, what we call vestibular ocular motor screening. And so, look, what the Neuroflex actually is a very advanced objective assessment of the vestibular ocular motor screening. And that's the old follow my finger follow my finger with your eyes assessment, and we look at how well the head and brain, the head and eyes, and even the neck work together to do these tests. Now we know through MRI studies done out of Canada that the Neuroflex, that the different parts of the brain are activated during the Neuroflex, and we show that with what we call functional MRI. It's where you show sort of differing patterns of blood flow, which shows that the part of the brain is activated. And so but importantly, what the Neuroflex does is it just gives these objective numbers that specialists like sports physicians and neurological physiotherapists can actually then utilize to quantify where an impairment is and the severity of that impairment. And then moving forward, you can then use that to track how well that person is recovering from the injury. And so we can then assess with a much higher degree of accuracy whether they have returned to essentially their pre-injury neurological performance. And that's where the Neuroflex sort of comes in, and that's where the Neuroflex is adding and improving the concussion management protocols for a lot of sports.
David, do you see the length of time, the day AFL-wise, the minimum gap, so basically missing one game with the 10 days, do you see that lengthening?
I see that becoming individualised. So look, from the work that we did within the SANFL and the community footy clubs, there were certainly players who, by the 12-day at the end of symptoms, actually that's the one thing I should actually clarify, because that's the one thing we did encounter this year, is there was slight confusion as to the 12-day rule. Yes. Now, the current protocol is that it's you need to have 12 days. It's a graded return to play, but that starts after the end of symptoms.
Yes.
And so if your symptoms last for a week, then you'll be off for at least 19 days.
And that's the way it should be. I don't think that seemed like it's still a bit of a mixed area where it's probably got to be, yes, exactly that. Symptoms.
Yeah, and so, but to be fair though, you do rely on the honesty of players.
Yes. Yeah.
And look, I mean, you know, if you're an 18-year-old who's about to make it in the league team, or similarly, if you're a 30-year-old who's worried about that 18-year-old getting into the league team, I mean, unfortunately, there are, you know, I did just mention that it's refreshing to see players take this seriously, but at the same time, you know, if you really love the sport,
yes,
unfortunately, there are some people who are going to not be honest. And look, I don't hold that against them. We're all human. But then again, this is where, you know, the Neuroflex comes in, because we have this objective data that, you know, you can't lie, you can't cheat that. And so, yeah, look, and getting back into your question in regards to, do I see the recovery time, for the want of a better term, extending out? As I said, I think it's going to be individualised, because there were certainly people who by the 12-day mark, they were fine. They could go back on the field symptomatically, they were fine. According to Neuroflex, they were fine. They could go back on the field. But we certainly saw in about half of our participants that they weren't quite back at that baseline level, and that they, you know, and indeed, you know, we passed that information on to the team doctors, and in instances, players were held back for an extra week. And look, concerningly, in some instances, we actually saw that there was a continued worsening of results. And, you know, that's important, because what it then also means is that you can then send that player off for additional clinical assessments, just to make sure there's nothing else sort of underlying that may be causing that as well. And so, yeah, this, you know, the Neuroflex and the improvement in technologies will mean that the time away from sport will actually become very individualised. And to me, that's the way it should be. It's like, if you've done a shoulder or an ACL, it's not like everyone's told 3 weeks you're back kicking. Everyone has a different return to play time.
Yep.
And yeah, that's what it should be for concussion.
So for our customers, for our listeners who who don't know how this is administered, it's like an ocular device that is almost like a virtual reality. The players are taking that obviously now at the beginning of the season. Are they able to administer this during game time, or does it have to be done in a clinic, or can it be done in the club rooms?
Yeah. So, look, you're right. It actually is a virtual reality system. And look, to do these tests beforehand, you needed an immersive room in a hospital, for example. And so the accessibility was very, very difficult. And so the virtual reality just increases the accessibility to everyone. You are correct that we do baseline measures on all the players in the pre-season, obviously taking into account any sort of concussion history, just in case we see any sort of errant values during the baseline. And then, look, what we were doing within AFL is that if a player came off with a suspected concussion, we would actually do the test 48 hours after that incident. That just meant that, for example, there's any lacerations, and that was actually quite a common injury we're finding, that could be dealt with on the day. You do get delayed symptoms as well. So some people, they might have a very nasty, head knock, but they might genuinely feel fine. But then 24 hours later, the headaches start and the dizziness starts. And so, we did leave it until the 48 hours post-incident to do the first test. But then, as I sort of alluded to, almost the more important test was that test when they claimed to be, 12 days post-symptomatic. And so we could, examine to ensure that they were physiologically returned to baseline. Look, other sports, just quickly, I know rugby union, they have actually been doing it essentially on the sideline, but that's because their sport allows that. They have what's called the HIA, or the Head Injury Assessments 1, 2 and 3. And the HIA 1 is a sideline. It's really a change room assessment, but you do have a 15-minute window to clear a player to go back onto the field. And so we've worked in with rugby to allow the Neuroflex to be done in that regard. But with AFL, a lot of the times now, a lot of teams are just erring on the side of caution, and they'll just bring a player off for the game. And so it means we're not sort of rushed to do that test.
Does this test obviously have to happen prior to concussion, or can it be run with people who have had concussions in the past?
Look, we can run it with people who have had concussions in the past. We just we do take that into account, so that, as I said, if we do show any large impairments or any obvious impairments during that baseline assessment, we at least have essentially a plausible explanation for why that impairment was occurred. But then importantly as well, it then can allow for that impairment to be addressed by specialists such as neurophysiotherapists, who can, in a lot of cases, can help and essentially, I wouldn't want to say the word cure, but treat any impairments that are shown on the Neuroflex.
So would this be rolled out in normal doctors' surgeries going forward, or is it still just in its infancy with sport at the moment?
No, look, I would see this being rolled out, and I've mentioned neurophysiotherapists, and the reason why I've said them is that they specialise particularly in a lot of vestibular and ocular physiology. And so the neurophysiotherapists, and look, I mean, for your listeners, we're currently working with Advanced Neuro Rehab and with Unli Physiotherapy, both of whom have have many neurological physiotherapists. They specialise in the eyes, the neck, the vestibular, the balance system. And so they're the ones who are most ideal to administer the Neuroflex, and indeed they already are. And so, what we would envision is that a doctor, for example, a GP or one of the sports doctors, would initially see the patient and just ensure that there's no other sort of problems, for example, a fracture to the skull, for example. But then they would refer and work in with these neurological physiotherapists and even orthoptists to essentially help the player, recover from the concussion and then to manage the concussion, as opposed to what happens now, which really is you just kind of wait 12 days, and if the player says they're right to go, then you sort of got to trust them.
Yeah. Well, mate, thank you very much for joining us tonight and giving us some background on the Neuroflex that we talked about with Sean Tasker last week. Any exciting news coming up? You've just mentioned that the FIFA World Cup. Is there any other sporting leagues that you might be getting into?
Look, we are being utilised by the Leicester City Football Club in the Premier League, and so that's exciting. And look, I can't name them at the moment, but certainly two high-profile NRL teams, one in Queensland, one in New South Wales, and a large UCI cycling team who will be here for the Tour Down Under. They'll be utilising us, but they've just asked us not to say anything at the moment, I think, because they literally just want I think they just want the competitive edge, which, again, in professional sports, I can understand. But, look, it's been great, and it's been really encouraging to see the change in attitudes to concussion and the, I guess, the willingness to adopt and to utilise, the Neuroflex and to help improve concussion management in sports.
And knowing Task, I'm sure he's volunteering then he'll go and lead the Leicester City side of things.
No, I think I've already beaten him to it. Yes. So
well played.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, David, and we'll keep an eye out for anything with Neuroflex.
No, thank you.
Liking this podcast? Please like, rate, and subscribe.
Before we go on to Happy Days, we thank David for spending some time with us talking about Neuroflex there. We did follow up, obviously, after speaking with Sean Tasker last week, and he's given us a really good insight into what they're doing.
Oh, it's such an important topic and something that we all need to be educated on. And I think we're gradually getting there. It's sort of like a slow burn in terms of learning the information, but learning the experts there, and it was a great insight.
I was most interested in, obviously, what they're doing behind the scenes for someone who has had concussive issues in the past. I'll take my own example as a little bit of a point in that as a footballer, I'm not very big in stature, and as a kid I was playing A-grade footy at 14, 15, 16 years of age, belted from pillar to post. And, it was interesting to see that they can actually sort of use the Neuroflex system to recommend you for further treatment if needed. Not that it's at that point, but I'm just saying that was one interesting aspect. But the one about 12 days individualised for each player was really good.
Yeah, the individualisation of it was, for me, the most interesting point, personally.
And we're going to keep an eye on that as we go on. All right, mate, let's go into Happy Days.
Happy Days.
And to kick us off today, Happy Days, happy birthday to Kari Webb, Australian golfer, 7 major titles, including US Open, LPGA Tour titles. Really good golfer from Australia for sure.
With Jan Stevenson, probably the two put the Australian female golf on the map. Certainly one of the all-time greats, Kari.
Played for a long, long time. She was probably one of the go-to players that you'd look for, especially with whatever advertisement or media that was coming through from the golf on the women's side. I think she would have done all right if she'd been around today a little bit more with the combined tours and the combined tournaments. Profile would have been a little bit higher as well. So happy birthday to Kari Webb. All right, mate, we move on to cricket. 84, Viv Richards scores 208 against Australia at the Melbourne Cricket Ground.
Yes, Vivian Isaac Alexander Richards, one of the all-time greats, the swagger, the chewing the gum, the no helmet, just the arrogance and self-confidence and arrogance.
Absolutely.
I think he's one of our all-time favourites for all those
From
reasons.
An opposition point of view, we talk about Lily and Marsh and Hughes, but Viv Richards always comes into it, a bit like Brian Lara, really comes into that psyche of going, these were the guys that you just love to watch.
I think especially so with West Indian cricket at the moment, it's crying out for a Richards or a Lara, something chronic.
Absolutely. Well, you never know what might happen in the near future. All right, mate, we move on to basketball in the US. Phil Jackson, which most listeners may know, may not know, coached the Chicago Bulls to one of their most successful periods. But he gets to 500 wins. He only did it in 682 games.
That's ridiculous. That's an incredible stat.
That is an incredible stat. I mean, when you've got Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen in that period there, you got to go, well, they were certainly successful during that period. But, 682 games, 500 wins.
Bit of Aussie influence as well.
Whew, Luke Longley.
Yes.
Fantastic. All right, mate, we move on. 2018, I didn't realise this until I was sort of checking up some of the stats that the Australian Open tennis only went to a 10-point tiebreaker in the fifth set in 2018.
I love those long matches, and 2018 in the fifth.
Yes.
It was a test of endurance. It was, yeah.
Well, you had 2 games that come back just off the top of my head as memory. You had one at Wimbledon, and I think you had one here in the Australian Open that actually was played over 2 days. They had to actually stop play for the night and come back the following day and play. And it wasn't like it was over and done within 5 minutes. They played for another 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah, and I do remember there was one game, I reckon it was Leighton Hewitt in a Aussie Open where I reckon it finished about 3 o'clock.
I was actually at that game at Melbourne Park. It finished at 4 a.m. in the morning. 4:03 a.m. I think it was from, again, memory. Yes, trying to catch a taxi in a train or a tram home after that game was near on impossible, so you ended up having to walk.
Yeah, 4 o'clock would last beers.
Well, they were at midnight. That was the problem.
Yeah.
So you definitely sobered up, that's for sure. All right, mate, let's scoot into the extra time and big finish.
Extra time, big finish.
All right, mate, we kick off with the AFL. Not 100% of stuff to talk about the AFL at the moment, other than that the government has sort of pushed back a little bit on the funding for the stadium for the new Tasmanian team.
Yeah, plenty of argy-bargy at the moment. Hopefully it's just posturing and both teams, both organisations are, playing
the cat and mouse game.
Yeah, the game, and that.
I think a stadium in Tasmania would certainly unite Tasmania as far as where they want to put it, where they want to build it, how they want to build it. I mean, you've got to understand that it's a winter sport, and down in Tasmania is not exactly the most friendly environment.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Look, they've got to be in the competition. It's farcical to have a so-called national competition without Tasmania in it.
Agreed.
Personally, I think it's farcical. There's 10 teams in Melbourne. Comes back to one of Neville Roberts' points earlier, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pre-season for a lot of the AFL teams have obviously wrapped up this week. It just reminds us that it's less than 100 days to round one.
And don't worry, footy will still be trying to make sure it's in the news 366 days of the year,
We'll see what happens on Boxing Day.
We had that farce of the AFL releasing the draw on, when the Australia were playing in the soccer at 7 in the morning. It was ridiculous.
Yep.
It was the softball.
Yeah, softball nationals. Now, I didn't realise this was going on last week. I happened to be at the baseball on Friday night, the Adelaide Giants, and there were a couple of games going on in the background, in the back paddocks that they've got there, and softball obviously shares the same facility with the baseball. And I look over and I see South Australian Guernseys, so I took a bit more of an interest and wandered over and had a bit of a watch. And gee, the South Australian under-23 side ends up coming runner-up in the national series that they had played.
Yeah, so some promising results there. Again, I think nowadays, I'm not sure that there's enough publicity of all sport. I reckon it's a bit of the part of the paper not being the big thing that it used to be. You just sort of things sneak by. And look, same thing, the Australian under-19 cricket carnival's on at the moment.
You wouldn't know it was on because there's no coverage on it. And I wouldn't have known. You're a cricket man. I wouldn't have known as a non-cricket guy.
Well, a bit of interest because Max Kelly, son of Richard, former Nord Glenelg player, playing there. And, I just happened to drive past Karen Rolton on whatever day of the week it was, saw South Australia were batting and got out my car and they lost a wicket. And I realised it was Max walking into bat next. So, stayed. I know this will amaze you. I did manage to sell a book.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
So out of that, but and I admit I saw a little bit of the semi yesterday, and New South Wales Metro was certainly the side of beat.
Yep.
There's a couple of players there. Let's just wait and see where they end up.
Yeah, fantastic. Swinging back to the softball, once I did do a little bit of research after actually seeing it live, their coverage is fantastic online, which is, if you're a softball, follower, you'd be pretty happy with what you're seeing.
Yeah, and that's the way, we understand that's now the way of the world, but unless you're right into that sport, like, as you said, myself with cricket, knowing the under-19, purely because I'm a cricket nut.
Yep.
Well, softball, unless you're in even a sports nuts, we don't really know. So
we'll try and keep above it. I've liked their Facebook page, and so I'm going to get updates. It's one of those ones where you're trying to cover as much as you can, try and give a bit of diversity, and well done to the South Australian team in the championships. All right, mate, we move on to basketball. The import has been signed. Ian Clark brings a bit of experience to the 36ers.
Yeah, big get. He's certainly credentials are pretty impeccable. You've yet to hear a bad word about him.
I heard him. Yeah, I heard him speak tonight on the news. I think it was very impressive. Has come obviously from a team point of view. The stories are coming out about Randall and how that sort of blew up, and this guy's completely opposite. So it can only mean good things.
And you probably think that's part of why they've maybe taken a little bit longer and really targeted someone. The character had to be the number one prerequisite, which is he should have been the prerequisite in the first place.
Could be here for a couple of years, Ian Clark, and I think that's exciting for 36ers fans. The NBL have followed what the NBA have done of playing a game on Christmas Day. Your thoughts, yes or no?
I feel sorry for the players, but I do actually think Christmas night, you get home Christmas night, tired after the Christmas Day, we've all eaten way too much. you've actually had a guts full of Christmas movies in the crap by then.
Yes.
A bit of sport, personally, for me, would be fantastic. I'd be more than happy to watch the Big Bash game on Christmas night, but I understand the players' point of view. So I can see both sides there.
I think it can be a very positive game for the NBL, that they've got games on that people can actually pull back and, there's nothing really on Christmas night. So
I think, too, let's also remember that there are a hell of a lot of people are lonely on Christmas Day, that it's not a great day for people. They may actually be thinking, you bloody beauty, there's something I can do.
Well, they can go to a game, yeah.
So I think that's a really important point, which often gets
forgotten about.
Yeah. Sydney to Hobart.
Yeah, we talked with Ben Hook a couple of weeks ago about the Sydney to Hobart race. Looks like it's going to be a great race ahead from what I'm hearing.
Yeah, the weather forecasts are very, very favourable.
Yeah.
I heard that earlier tonight, and they are saying that, I know they predict the records can go and all that time, but
I reckon it might happen this year. So
chance.
You're watching the cricket in the morning, you flip over to the Sydney to Hobart, and then you flip back to the cricket. And then I think you got some Big Bash that's sort of somewhere in there as well.
Yep.
So you're going to be covered for sports, that's for sure. And just one more that I wanted to add that's not on our run sheet was a little bit of Christmas movies, sporting Christmas movies. I'm going to give you a couple to maybe watch over the break. Rocky.
Yes, look, all
classic
the Rocky films. Yep. I'm a Rocky 3 was my favourite.
Yes.
But yeah, Rocky films. Yep, one of the all-time greats.
Moneyball, which sort of a little bit of baseball, but talks about sport and economics of sport. Certainly one to watch if you want to watch that one over the holiday break. And probably the third one for me is just a little bit of a fun one. Major League. Charlie Sheen and those guys getting up to the antics, certainly for a bit of a laugh. But that'd be my 3 recommendations over the Christmas break for sure.
Oh, and the club
yes, Collingwood as well. Yep, we'll add that one in there.
Yep.
All right, mate.
So we've got the baseball.
Mate, to finish off, I went to the baseball on Friday night. Thoroughly enjoyed myself. A bit of a windy night out at the Adelaide Giants home game. Probably prevented 3 or 4 home runs from the Adelaide team. They were hitting them quite well, but just with the wind, the direction it was coming from down at West Beach, prevented that a few times. And Perth have always been the Adelaide Giants' nemesis, and they got us on Friday night quite convincingly in the end. They backed it up again on Saturday, but Adelaide finished off the 3-game series with a win on Sunday, I believe it was.
Yeah, so, and around the mark, still on top.
Yep.
Hopefully, the word is that there's been a fair bit of positivity, and Mayo and signing another pitcher to finalise their roster for the push for the championship.
Yep. So Perth is the only side that can sort of catch them there. They are going to be their nemesis, but I think the way that the conferences are going to work, we may not see them again until the finals.
Okay.
But, I think after breaking the ABL record, we can cut them a little slack for a couple of games, but after Christmas it looks exciting.
Yeah, go the Giants.
All right, mate, that is a huge episode to finish us off for 2022. We want to thank all of our listeners, not only here from Australia, but looking at the stats, we're actually getting some overseas people listening along the lines as well. We wish you guys a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Be safe. And we will see you back in 2023 for Malcolm and myself having a live podcast. We're working on getting some video equipment as well.
Yep.
But for the next 2 weeks, we're going to go back over our favourite interviews, and we're going to rehash those for you guys to listen to over your Christmas break.
Greatly appreciate it. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
In this crazy world we live in, we all need the distraction. Enjoying the show? Like, rate, and subscribe. Hook up and connect with us on social media at Sportscast SA. We'll see you next time on Game On.